Hello, and welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB, some different content for you today. We're going to talk about spoilers. Lots of people make spoiler videos where they talk about the new cards on their way. Usually I leave it to them, and I'm still going to enjoy the spoiler videos that other content creators make, but I think I'm in a particularly... I'm ready for some new cards. I think I'm more hyped for the set than I've been in a while. It seems like a while since a new set came out, so I'm going to lean into the hype and how excited I am about some of what we're seeing from Kaldheim, which launches in late January. And I'm going to make a video talking about what I think of the cards, and I'm going to try to gear the video towards who I think will use this card in constructed formats on MTG Arena. So I might mention Brawl, I might mention Historic, will definitely mention Standard. I'm not particularly concerned about Limited, and I'm also skipping cards that I don't think are really on a Standard power level and are more made for Limited, and talking about cards that I think people either expect to see play in Standard or will almost certainly see play in Standard, like the ones that we're going to start with. The quick little bit of spoilers we got last week to sort of tide us over through the holidays, I want to say, first of all, I really like it. I really appreciate that we got a whole bunch of new cards to start hyping the set, as opposed to the silence that I remember having last year as we waited for the holiday season to be over so we could start talking about Theros Beyond Death. And I really love that they've put out the channel trailer, which you can find on YouTube, and that they've put out some cards for us to get excited about. So let's talk about our first looks at Kaldheim. They kicked it off with some of the cards we really knew about already. Mark Rosewater on a blog confirmed that the pathways that were missing, the 4 pathways that were not in the Zendikar Rising set, would be in Kaldheim, and here we are. Bark Channel pathway is the Simic pathway. Mixed feelings about the pathways and how they were divided up. On one hand, a lot of the colors that didn't get a pathway were the more pushed color combinations. So, like, Simic is a prime example. Did we need more Simic? Probably not. On the other hand, it's really weird to get some of them in a later set and some of them right away. And the pathways are super powerful lands, and this is shown out as the format has evolved in Standard. Decks that don't use pathways have slowly fallen out of favor. I'm thinking of like Rakdos Kroxa, which was strong in the beginning of the format and now sees very little play. And like decks like Bant, you really don't see very often. The closest you can say is Temur, but even Temur, while being a powerful deck, isn't nearly as in favor as other decks. And is it just because of a pathway? Probably not, but it certainly doesn't help when your mana's not as smooth as other decks in the format. And the more refined decks get, the more important curving out is, the more crucial pathways are. The pathways I'm going to show you here are an absolute 10 out of 10. Whether you play Historic, whether you play Brawl, whether you play Standard, if you expect to touch these colors at all, getting the pathways is a good move. It will make your mana smoother, and the longer you have them, the more the impact is felt over games and games and games of Magic. So if you are looking for something to do with your wild cards, you can't go wrong with just getting the pathways. Tear off the band-aid. I know it sucks to craft lands, but get it over with. You're going to want them. And we're going to talk about the pathways, of course, but I gotta say, I'm not usually an art guy. I don't usually pick up a card and the first thing I do is ogle the art. But in general, the art so far in Kaldheim and the vibe is hitting me really well. I'm really loving what I'm seeing, and nowhere is that more true than the pathways. I find the pathway art to be absolutely gorgeous. So here on Bark Channel pathway, like, I could just look at this all day long, and it's just the first one. We've got many more to go. The backside, Tide Channel pathway, looking like the parting of the Red Sea from the Bible. Just this pathway right through the ocean, and you see the shipwreck stuff. Oh, it's really pretty, like absolutely pretty. And then we get to Blightstep pathway, which is black and red, and we've got this character skipping through a swamp trying not to fall in. Reminds me a lot of in Lord of the Rings, the swamp that they had to cross going to Mordor. And then on the other side of the Mount Doom, we see a character again jumping from like post to post, trying to stay out of the lava. So a real Lord of the Rings vibe on this one, which I love looking at. And then moving into easily the greatest pathway ever made, the greatest card ever introduced to Magic, potentially, in the last few years. The blue and white Hengegate pathway. Yes, they're my colors. Could anything be a more clear craft for CGB than a blue-white pathway? But my lord, have I missed it. I've spent a lot of time playing Tranquil Cove in the last few months, and I'm looking forward to getting away from that with Hengegate pathway and this gorgeous art with the ship and the kind of beautiful rivers. And it's not really the Aurora Borealis. It's like there's some kind of hieroglyphic. There's runes in the sky. It's oh my goodness. I'm gushing over art. I never thought that would be me. I never thought that would be this channel. Let me know. Am I the only one? Am I just getting old? Is this just hitting me in a different way than normal? But look at Darkboard pathway, the green-black pathway. And you've got the cave with the holes in the ceiling and the light shining through. These are the full art special versions, which I'm sure you'll have to buy as a bundle with gems, but I'm probably going to do it because these just strike me as very few have. This art reminds me of Gaia's Cradle, kind of the looping wood, circular, this path through what looks like a giant tree hollowed out. Absolutely blows me away. Anyway, if you've had enough gushing over the art, now let's get into some cards that aren't just lands. This is a card that a lot of people are hyping up, the Pyre of Heroes. This is a 2-mana artifact, and you can, for 2 mana, tap it to sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature, has converted mana cost equal to 1, plus that creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, shuffle your library, activate this ability anytime you could cast a sorcery. The last line is very important because in the world of Giant Tribal, the ability to sacrifice Kroxa with the trigger on the stack would have been really cool, but because you can only use this as a sorcery, that's a little bit of a downer. So, Birthing Pod is a card that people are always trying to bring back and trying to reimagine. I think that everybody loved Birthing Pod, but it was too powerful, eventually had to be banned in a few formats, although I think it made it on standard just fine. And they're trying to revisit it, and this one has a tribal flair. The weird thing is that while this card looks amazing and fun to build with, right now, with the cards that we have available, there isn't a lot of value in entering the battlefield or dying from those cards. Yes, you can turn a 3-mana creature into a 4-mana creature, but if there's no death benefit or enters the battlefield benefit from either side, then all you did was spend mana and throw away a card to slightly upgrade it. And that's not good enough. You need the ETBs, the enter the battlefield triggers, or the leaves the battlefield triggers to matter. And we're missing that because a lot of what used to be tied into creatures with enters the battlefield triggers like Ravenous Chupacabra and Hostage Taker has been replaced by the adventure mechanic with Murderous Rider and Brazen Borrower. And that's not really the same thing when you use those with Pyre of Heroes, because you had to invest in both the spell and the creature. So where does this fit? Dead Zone in my Discord posted a bunch of things like elementals and humans and warriors and various pod tribes that exist right now. But the one that gets the most, I think, is Clerics, which does have a lot of death triggers and benefits. And Clerics, unfortunately, is still a low power level tribe. They need help. So, in my opinion, Pyre of Heroes, in Standard, isn't going to get a lot of help. Now, what about Historic? Historic is interesting, because Historic does have Ravenous Chupacabra, Hostage Taker. The humans in Historic are kind of an interesting tribe on their own. But on top of that, there's also Elementals with Risen Reef, which is very exciting, and the 4-mana Omnath. No, the other 4-mana Omnath. And I feel like Historic is where this deck has to go, where this card has to go first. You can also picture this in a deck with Mayhem Devil, sacrifice triggers, doing some damage here and there. Although the Devil like subtype isn't very useful. There would have to be something else going on. But I think Historic is the first place that you're going to want to brew with Pyre of Heroes and see if you can come up with a tribal deck that has a lot of enters the battlefield value and go from there. Because I don't think Standard has it. In the meantime, if you want to do Brawl Commander, then this definitely fits in a Tribal Commander and Brawl deck, if that's where you want to go with it. We can check out the full art really quick. It really is extended art, slightly brighter. Then we have this card, Showdown of the Skalds, showing that sagas are indeed returning in Kaldheim. It seems like they're a pretty regular part of the Magic scene right now, and for good reason. Sagas are a great take on enchantments, in my opinion. Enchantment, historically, is a very underpowered archetype, but sagas really give it an oomph by bringing card advantage to colors like white in a very white way. This one is a red and a white for 2 colorless that the chapter 1 is all the gravy. Instead of waiting for 3 turns, you get the gravy right away. And this is exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. And then chapters 2 and 3 are whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Holy cow. This is crazy. 4 cards. They banned Escape to the Wilds. This isn't Escape to the Wilds. You don't get to mana ramp and help you take better advantage of all those cards you reveal, but it has some of that flavor, and it's on a blinkable permanent. So a few things come to mind right away. Yorion comes to mind right away. Flickering this and playing it over and over is great. Another thing that comes to mind are Adventures. Adventures were great with Escape to the Wilds because of their low cost of one side or the other. You could play them as a creature or play them as a spell and save the creature for later. This has a very similar effect, and because there are so many creatures in the Adventure deck, you're more likely to use the 2 and 3 parts of the ability. So I'm looking at Mardu Yorion, of course, and you're also looking, I think, maybe Jeskai has a chance, although Jeskai's had a lot of trouble lately. And I really want to look into Naya Adventures, Naya Winota Adventures, where cards like this seem like they could be very powerful. This card seems absolutely primed for Standard play. And I think that if there isn't a deck abusing it in Standard, then it probably means something got broken in Standard, like Omnath was for a period of time. In Historic, we'll see. It might be too slow for Historic. Escape to the Wilds has shown up in a few places, mostly combo places. Maybe there's a combo deck for this. But it's not the sure thing in Historic that it is in Standard. In Brawl, of course, if you're playing red and white, I don't know why you wouldn't play a copy of this. It seems like a very fun, value-driven saga. I think that the thing that most people don't think about with this card is, what is combat like the turn after you play Showdown of the Skalds? How can the opponent block anything when you might have 2 or 3 spells that you've revealed with the Showdown that can distribute +1/+1 counters at instant speed? Like if you reveal a Bone Crusher Giant, then you can put a +1/+1 counter on something, kill something, and then you can cast the Giant as well. It's any spell that you cast, and the counter goes on any creature, and it can do it at instant speed. Like, that's going to make combat absolutely miserable for the opponent, and they're going to end up taking a ton of damage. Plus, you got ahead of them in cards. It's so much rolled into one. It's a little terrifying, quite honestly. So I look forward to seeing Showdown of the Skalds all over Standard. The next card is Magda the Brazen Outlaw, 1 in a red, 2/1, Legendary Dwarf Berserker, rare. Other dwarves get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, create a treasure token, sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or a dragon, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle your library. This is a tough one to evaluate for Standard because we don't have the dwarves yet. We do have some artifacts. When you think about what to do with treasures, we have artifacts along the lines of Embercleave. Does red aggro need another way to get Embercleave? And we have dragons along the lines of Terror of the Peaks. So there's some really cool stuff that we can fetch, and it gives the mono red deck a little more play than the typical 1, 2, 3, 4 Embercleave. When you get some tribal themes going, and you can also use search your library effect, and you also have some amount of mana ramp, because remember, treasure tokens can be sacrificed for mana. That's pretty cool. Anyway, there's a dragon, 3 mana, 5/4 that can only attack when you control 5 or more artifacts, and whenever a creature dies, you make a treasure. That card seems built to play with Magda, or at least in the same deck. But the next question is, what are your dwarves? In Standard, we have Torbrand. In Standard, we have 7 dwarves. In Standard, we have Rimrock Knight. What we need is a cheap 1-mana dwarf that's going to put the pressure on the opponent, like a 1-mana 2/1 dwarf, even with a drawback. Suddenly makes this card so much more appealing. So I really hope that Magda makes it in Standard. I hope that the Dwarf Tribe has a lot of support, because this indicates that there might be a much cooler mono red deck than we've seen before, or maybe even a multicolor deck if we get dwarves in other colors. We have seen some white dwarves in the early spoilers, so maybe a Boros deck is on the table. Then the other thing about this is Historic, and I think that Historic gives us a good idea of what Magda can become, because in Historic we have Kaladesh, which has Toolcraft Exemplar. That is a pretty sweet card, and when you curve it with Magda is pretty awesome. It also says whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, not whenever it attacks. That is important because of crewing vehicles. Vehicles appear to be returning in this set. Hopefully they are pretty darn cool if we have some powerful ones. I'm not expecting a Smuggler's Copter, but when you think about every time you crew also getting a treasure token, vehicles are usually artifacts themselves. You should be able to get up to 5 treasures, tapping multiple things, then go get a dragon. It all sounds really fun, and I like the idea that you can hide 1 or 2 dragons in your deck, have them be super powerful, and go fetch them with mono red, instead of just always getting Embercleave. Let's have a quick look at the alternate art here for Magda. A little what would you call that? Of the North Game of Thrones punk look with the white hair and the cool dragon hanging out. The art just really hits me. I really enjoy it. All right. The next card we're going to talk about is Realm Walker. This is 2 and a green for a 2/3 shapeshifter. It has Changeling. Changeling means the creature is every creature type. That leads to a lot of weird interactions. So if you have a Magda, this is a dwarf. It gets +1/+0. If you also have like a card that gives Merfolk +1/+1, that pumps the Realm Walker too, because it's a Merfolk and a dwarf. You see what I mean? But if you're attacking with Realm Walker and you control Winota, Winota triggers for every non-human that attacks. Well, tough beans. Realm Walker, while being every other frickin' type in the world, is also a human, so it doesn't trigger Winota. So it also, when it's in the deck, it's not every creature type, so you can't find it with Winota, which finds humans, because when it's in the deck, it's not a human, it's a shapeshifter. Get it? Easy. Easy. Anyway, Realm Walker enters the battlefield. You choose a type. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of the library. So, the 2/3 body is pretty good. You can't kill it with a Bone Crusher Giant, which is a bit of a litmus test for your 3-drops most of the time. This is card advantage to tribal decks that don't otherwise have good card advantage. I don't know how much play this will see in Standard. It's right on the line. It's in the spot where it just gets eaten by a Skyclave Apparition, or somebody goes over the top of it with Embercleave and the Great Henge. But it's also a reasonable body that doesn't always have to get killed, that can draw cards, kind of. I think of Radha. Radha would get you card advantage by getting lands off the top of your deck. There are lands in every deck, but Radha doesn't really see play. So it's hard for me to envision Realm Walker seeing play unless there is a tribal deck that really buffs the Realm Walker while also using its ability. So if Dwarf Tribal is a serious thing, then maybe. I also think of tribes that need card advantage that don't really have it. Warriors and Dogs come to mind. These are good Winota decks, and they're pretty powerful tribes with decent lords like Pack Leader, but they don't have card advantage, and if their creatures get killed, they just don't do very much. Realm Walker can help you recover. I think this card is borderline. It might see play in Standard, it might not. It depends on the format and everything around it. And I can't think of a great home for it in Historic, even though there are a lot of good tribal decks. I just don't think that those tribal decks want to pay 3 mana for a 2/3. So I don't see it making it in Historic either. And if there is a tribal green Brawl deck, there's no reason not to have a Realm Walker, so I think it will see plenty of casual play. Here's the alt art, kind of the fuller alternative. And yeah, it's got this vibe from the movie The Village, the M. Night Shyamalan movie that I'm kind of thinking of when I see the horns and stuff. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. It also has Buy a Box promo on it, so maybe this is the version you get in your Buy a Boxes for Kaldheim. Of course, the true Buy a Box promo for Kaldheim is the CGB token coming from CoolStuffInc.com. So, just saying. Stay tuned till the end. The next card I'm going to talk about is Kaya, the Inexorable. This is 3 and a white and a black for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker named Kaya. And it's a mythic, of course. +1, put a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature it gains when this creature dies or is put into exile. Return it to its owner's hand and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. -3 is exile target non-land permanent. -7, you get an emblem with. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. So, let's go down the abilities one by one. I'm going to start at the bottom. Usually evaluating a planeswalker by its ultimate isn't a good move because they don't come up very often, but I like it in this case because with this emblem, you can just recast Kaya. If Kaya dies, it goes to the graveyard, gets bounced to your hand, or becomes exiled. At the beginning of each upkeep, you may just cast Kaya again. It is a legendary spell, after all. So it is an emblem that fuels itself, because you can -7 and then get the Kaya right back, and get Kaya back for the rest of the game, or get something better if you have something better. The -3, of course, is the juice. It is the good part. Exile target non-land permanent feels pretty good. +1, this is the weird part. You need a creature. You need a creature that you want to get back. The creature needs to die or get put into exile. So Kaya wants some critters on the board. You think of Skyclave Apparition with that ability, and it's pretty cool. But there is a problem. It returns to the hand, not the battlefield, which I think is a big fail since there already is a card called Kaya's Ghost Form that rotated out of Standard that returns the creature to the battlefield. So back to hand is a lot worse than back to battlefield. And I think that the +1 and Kaya for the most part misses the mark because of that. I think that this is the kind of thing that looks really cool to casual Magic players that is much harder to line up in practice, and I don't think Kaya will be a very powerful competitive planeswalker. When compared to Elspeth Conquers Death and when compared to Ashiok, I think she comes up short against both of them. It doesn't mean that she'll see the 0 play. Yorion decks are big, they need to fill out spots. 1 or 2 Kaya doesn't seem crazy, and plussing to protect a Yorion so that when it comes back you get to loop things again also sounds pretty awesome. And the -3 means the card is never terrible. So I think this is maybe a 1 or 2 of in some very niche decks, but probably not a major player in the format until we see the +1 at work. Maybe there's a creature deck that Kaya is just totally excellent in and makes the battlefield just unassailable for the opponent. That the +1 with Selfless Savior, for example, sounds like a pretty cool loop where you can sacrifice the Savior to make something indestructible. And even if they don't try to kill anything, you can get the 1/1 Spirit token, recast the Savior, and plus onto it again. That doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound great. And I think Kaya is going to fall in kind of this mediocre range for Planeswalkers. However, once again, like I find this art, especially this alt art, to be a serious upgrade, and I've felt many times that the alt art wasn't that special, but in this set, like it's really trying to get me to buy in. It's really trying to get me to spend the cosmetic gems. The next card we're going to talk about is Halvar, the God of Battle. This is a 2 white mythic legendary god 4/4. Unlike the gods that we've seen on Theros, this is not indestructible, and creatures you control that they also don't have devotion. Should mention that too. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. At the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. So you can move an aura or an equipment around from creature to creature without paying anything at the beginning of each combat. That's your opponent's combat and your combat if you want to. And then there is a flip side. Let's have a look. This is the Sword of the Realms, which is 1 and a white for legendary artifact equipment, and equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. Whenever equipped creature dies, return it to owner's hand and equip 1 and a white. So 4 total mana, 1 and a white to play it, 1 and a white to equip it. The +2/+0 and vigilance is just meh. The when it dies, return it to the hand, as I talked about with Kaya, is also meh. If it were the battlefield, it would be really exciting, but it's the hand. So that's a bit of a problem for me. I think that what this card represents is better than the card itself, because I don't find it to be a very strong card unless it turns out that the value on these lines with equipped and enchanted creatures having double strike, or moving auras and equipments around for free, if there was something that benefited that, lets you draw a card whenever that happens, a Kiri. If you're going to build around something like that, maybe this has value. But the way the card lines up right now isn't very good to me. It's a very medium card. But what excites me about the card is that you have equipment on a flip card, on a DFC, that you can play as a creature or as an equipment. And I think that's a big deal as they continue to try to figure out how to make auras and equipment good. I think that the big fear always is that you'll have an equipment without a creature, or you'll have your creature that likes equipment without equipment. If you draw the wrong half of the deck, it doesn't work. If the opponent destroys one or the other, it doesn't work. So, if you have the option in one card to play it as either one or the other, you can solve a lot of those issues. And I hope that there's a lot more one side is equipment, one side is a creature in this set. Same with auras. I think that that's a great fix for auras too. If one side is a creature, one side is an aura. So I hope that that's where they're going. I think it's a really cool move with DFCs. And I like how, one, I like that DFCs, double face cards, aren't just for pathways. I thought that maybe the pathways would be the only ones. And I also like that they're thematic. The DFCs in Zendikar, where the plane is about the land, had a land on one side and a spell on the other. It looks like the DFCs, aside from the pathways, in Kaldheim, which is all about the equipment and fighting with weapons, it looks like one side is going to be an equipment and the other side will be a creature, as opposed to being, the same land, spell, flip card. So I think that's really cool. I think that's really smart. I like the design, and I'm optimistic that this represents that there will be some other really cool half equipment, half creature cards coming in the set. Get a quick look at some more of the alternate art, which once again just keeps knocking it out of the park. This is really cool. Like, this is also very reminiscent of something I can't put my finger on. That pose, the sword, like something about that I've definitely seen before. It seems like a callback. And then we have the kind of Excalibur shot here of the sword impaling the carcasses of the enemy, and a very cool framing job. So, the last card we're going to talk about today is Seraph the Realm Eater. This is a legendary creature wolf, 1 black green, 3/3 rare. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Seraph the Realm Eater. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Seraph has 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed in this way. We got the alternate art over here, which, again, very, very cool framing job. Just a sweet look. And a lot of people have jumped on my stream and asked me about this card. This card seems to have a ton of buzz, and I'm probably going to let you down. I hate to let you down at the end of the show, but this is not very standard competitive playable. It's 3 mana for a decent body, a 3/3, that doesn't impact the board when it enters the battlefield, and it doesn't fuel itself. If it said the opponent had to sacrifice a non-land permanent when it entered the battlefield, which you probably can't because there's not enough room for all this text on one card, then maybe there'd be something to it, because at least you get a +1/+1 counter right away. But it doesn't fuel itself. It needs the opponents to send cards to their graveyard, or you have to kill their cards, and the card has to stick around while that happens, and you still don't get to set it off till the beginning of your upkeep. So it's going to be at least probably 2 turns if you play this on turn 3 before you even have the option to use the ability. The idea that your card is going to hang out for that long and be unopposed isn't realistic for standard competitive play, and I don't think this card is going to be very effective in standard. In historic, maybe in Jund's Sacrifice, because they have ways to kill the opponent's creatures without spending mana, Cat Oven Mayhem Devil, but if you're doing that, you're probably already winning, and you probably don't need Serolf the Realm Eater, but it's a pretty interesting card in historic for Jund's Sacrifice, I think. Other than that, this is a sweet Commander card, because in Commander and in Brawl, in Commander multiplayer games, you do not have to worry about fueling this card. People will play Magic, smash into each other, and fuel this card for you. I think this is one of the clearest examples of Wizards of the Coast making cards in their new sets for Commander. I think that this is clearly meant to be a Commander card. That's where the card will shine, and it will dominate some kitchen tables in the near future. I'll probably build a Commander deck around it for my playgroup. It'll be fun. But I don't think it's meant to dominate the competitive scene without some really interesting pieces being built around it. So for now, Serolf, as far as competitive arena goes, is not where it's at. And of course, the finest card in all of Kaldheim, by far, is the CovertGoBlue Shark Creature Token. Yep, if you're gonna hard slam a Shark Typhoon, you better have some CovertGoBlue creature tokens. I am actually really thrilled with how this token turned out. The kind of metal theme of Kaldheim was matched by my unbridled enthusiasm for crushing red mages, even with the fist in the air and the weapon I'm yielding, like, feels frickin' sweet. So awesome that Cool Stuff Inc. made this token. If you would like one of these, pre-order any box, any booster box. It can be set boosters, it can be draft boosters, it can be collector boosters from CoolStuffInc.com. Remember to use the promo code CGB5 to get a discount, and with every pre-ordered box, they are shipping a CovertGoBlue token. So, if you are international and they do not ship to your country, which they do ship to some countries, make sure you check on the website. I am not customer service. If you post in comments, do they ship to X country? I can't help you. Go to CoolStuffInc.com, send a message. But you can use a freight forwarding service. These things are very easy to find through Google. Many of them are in Florida, where Cool Stuff Inc. is located. So it's a short shipping job to the freight forwarding service who will send it to your country. So look up freight forwarding services if you want to receive these, but they do not ship to your country. That's my recommendation and suggestion. Thank you to everybody for supporting the channel. Remember to shop on CoolStuffInc.com. Use the promo code CGB5. I hope you enjoyed this look at some Kaldheim spoilers and this video. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.